funny because just one of those things that happen. And
now was Phuket, was that, there's a place where there was like an orphanage that you went to? Was that there, or Vung Tau? Or?
No, there was a, down at Phuket on the South China Sea, it was south of Phuket, there was a leper colony.
Mm-hmm.
We used to go to with the Chaplains. And that was one of those places like Vung Tau that was really strange because you got down there and while we left somebody with the aircraft, we never had to really worry about it. Matter of fact, we took a bathing suit and went swimming in the South China Sea because it was right on the water's edge. And we'd go swimming. It was run by the Catholic Church. And it was a place where you could literally eat off the floor. I mean, I never saw a place before or since that was as strack or as clean or as sparkly or as whatever. And we went down there, maybe 2-3 times a month. I took the chaplains down there. You know, first time you go down, you're real skeptical about it because you're not at a military base and you're kind of middle of nowhere and you're kind of whatever. And you got a long ways you can see down the beach. And I mean, it was in a location where you weren't really worried about getting surprised right away. And they never had any trouble with the Viet Cong. And it was a place where, yeah, you let down your guard, but you don't want to let down too far, if that makes sense to you. But no, we'd take our bathing suits down there and go swimming. And that's the only place, other than going for church conferences down there, that I remember actually swimming. And we actually had a swimming pool that they completed while I was there at 52nd Group Headquarters. And even in those 23 days when I was just sitting around, I didn't go swimming. I mean, I don't know why, but just didn't.
Okay. Church conferences, was this for the chaplains or you, or what was that?
Well, I'm a Mormon, and the church has quite a bit of pull. And we had an in-service conference quarterly, and if we wanted to go, they had to let you go. But they're not, your commanders and the people aren't going to tell you. So the chaplains come back to me, and they said, "You're LDS?" I said, "Yeah, I'm LDS, Latter-day Saint." Name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Right. So we go by LDS. And he says, "You're LDS." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Here, you might want to see this." And I took it. Oh! And this was down at Cameron Bay. And he says, "You want to go?" I said, "Yeah." Well, I let my group leader know, and then I had an aircraft at my disposal for one whole day to bring in other LDS I knew that were out at outer bases that wanted to go. Because if they wanted to go, they could go. And I'm going out visiting them when I take these commanders out. Matter of fact, the joke was with some of these commanders, if we need him, we know what bunker he's in. Because I'd go visit some of the other church members out there. And I'd fly them in. We had a C-130. He'd fly us down to Cameron, sit on the tarmac and wait for us. And we'd spend that night and the next day, and then that evening we'd come back. And the C-130, they were that respectful. But you know, you got this dual thing going on again, because they got to let you go, but they don't want to let you go. I mean, when I was in basic and AIT and all that other stuff, I'd want to go to church services, and usually we weren't on base. In our church, we have sacrament service, and then you have Sunday school, and then we have priesthood, so it's 3 hours. And then you got to travel there, and you got to travel back, and I'd get back. And most other Protestant services or Catholic services is maybe an hour, and you got travel time back. So I can't prove I got more KP and more guard duty than other people, but I have my deep suspicions because they didn't want to believe me. But not only that, I don't know if I mentioned to you before, but one of my R&Rs I took in conjunction with an area Far East Servicemen's Conference, which ended up being held at the base of Mount Fuji. And I went there to that conference and then spent the rest of my R&R that time. I went down to Osaka, Japan. The World's Fair was at Osaka. And it was nice enough to go with a couple other church members. So I ain't worried about some guy trying to bring a gal into our hotel room in the middle of the night. And had that happen before. You know, you share a room with Lieutenant so-and-so, and in the middle of the night you got extra company. Didn't have to worry about stuff like that. It was kind of nice. So we went down there and did that. But again, That was something, if you wanted to go, they had to set up your R&Rs and make room for you so you could go. But they weren't telling you. I mean, you had to know about it. And because I was flying the chaplains, because my guys weren't interested, I had insight to some of that stuff. And
okay. Now, that gets me into a couple other questions. One of them is, where would you take the chaplains to, or what would they be doing?
Anything and everything. I mentioned Firebase 6 before, where we brought in a bulldozer level off top, took them up to Firebase 6. Matter of fact, that runs into another story down there. That day that I'm referring to, one of the guys came out and says, "Can I take the chaplains?" I'm looking at him going, "Yeah, what's up?" "Well, they ain't got nothing for me to do. I want the flight time." And okay, so he took my aircraft, and he took the chaplains. And he went up to Firebase 6 with him, and he's up there for a while, and Firebase 6, top of this mountain. So the cotton field from the clouds ended up below, and he's looking at the weather, and he goes, "This ain't good." So he goes over to the Protestant chaplain, and he says to him, he says, "If we don't leave here before long, you're going to have a long time to do whatever you want." He says, "The weather's changing, and we got to go." Protestant chaplain says, "Okay, go start up the aircraft. I'll tell Father." So he goes over and he starts up the aircraft, and the Protestant chaplain comes, and they're waiting, and Father ain't coming right away. And finally, Father comes, and he's got a shawl over his neck and a chalice under his arm and some other stuff. And you can tell he didn't put everything back in his box he's got that he travels with. And he's coming back. He says, "Son, puts in his headphones. He says, 'Let's go before the Lord finds out what I did to the Mass.'" So they leave, and they're coming back to our base. And we had a one-eyed Charly. And a one-eyed Charly is a guy that the Viet Cong would press into service. And they'd give him some dilapidated gun. And they'd give him a couple rounds of ammunition. They'd tell him, "Shoot at the Americans." And they would tell him where to go, and he'd find an empty can, and he'd put his 2 empty cartridges in there that he fired at the Americans. And there'd be 2 live ones in there, and that's for to shoot at the next day. And they'd kind of keep an eye on him that way, and he's got to shoot at people. Well, if you got one and you know what he is, you don't return fire. They might get somebody that can actually shoot. Okay? So we had a one-eyed Charly on our base. And if you get anybody landing, you tell them you got a one-eyed Charly, and you just, you know. And today he hasn't done his duty. So you kind of know what's going on. Well, all the while I was there, the only aircraft he ever hit was the one coming back in with the chaplain. And there's a mic button on the floor, and you have one mic boom. You have a control panel that determines what radios you hear and which ones you transmit on. And for some reason, the mic that the Catholic chaplain had was set on FM or Fox mic, and he hit the button. Of course, everybody in the aircraft are monitoring that so they can hear, but he's also now going to transmit to the whole world. And the Protestant chaplain keyed up the mic and looked at the Catholic chaplain, and he says, "The Lord found out." They are sitting on the gas tank in the back, and it has a bulletproof or a ceramic plate on top of it, and that's where the rounds went, into the fuel tank in the back. Both rounds hit the fuel tank, and it's a self-sealing tank, so it dripped a little bit afterwards, but didn't really leak. Matter of fact, they came over there with a crane and a flatbed and picked it up and put it on and took it over to the place to change the tank and that. But that's, now he just did this over the air on a frequency we use for our landing field. So for the next month or two, you get an aircraft coming through, and they're coming out of Pleiku, and they're coming up our way, and they'd call, "Artillery Hill, this is Gunslinger 5-5. We'll be coming through your control zone going up the road to Khartoum. Are we clear?" "Gunslinger, this is Artillery Hill. Guns are cold, and we have nothing on the field. Feel free." So we're telling them we got no traffic on our airfield, and the guns on top of the hill aren't shooting anywhere. Do your thing, you know. And then they'd come back. "By the way, what'd the Lord find out?" We get that comment for about a month or two afterwards.